Hey folks, my name is Kaya. I'm the Director of Education at the Big Garden. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about container gardening. So in this lesson, we're going to be covering why we should be growing food in containers, how we can grow food in containers, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end.
What's the cat's name?
Also, that's my cat. So why grow in containers? Like many of you mentioned, you don't have access to a place in the ground where there's nutrients in the ground where it's safe to grow, or you don't have any space. So it takes up minimal space. It doesn't have to cost anything. And it's really mobile too. You can have something growing in a container and take it inside or whatever if it's getting chilly. Bring it back outside, follow the sun around your house. People get real creative. It can be fun. Also, as we mentioned, food sovereignty, choosing what you're eating if you're growing your own food. And you can save your seeds too, so that's free food. And sharing it with your neighbors and your friends and family. And also deterring pests. These are my chickens in my container garden.
You save the seeds. Aren't a lot of our foods kind of irradiated, so you can't save the seeds, or you're going to have to go to an heirloom to try and get good?
Right. So if you can buy seeds that are heirloom and hybrids from seed catalogs online, and you can save seeds from those if you want to buy seeds. Otherwise, you can check out any public library, Omaha Public Library. You can check out seeds and get free seeds from the library. And the Big Garden, as well as a bunch of other organizations like Blazing Seed Cooperative, we all worked together and made it so that you can get seeds for free in a couple different places. That's a good question. Yes. Seed sovereignty and food sovereignty don't necessarily exist in capitalism. Okay, so first step in growing food in containers, you gotta scout your location. So yes, direct sunlight is ideal, but I'm here to tell you if you want to grow things, anything can be grown in a container if you're creative. And also you don't need direct sunlight. It's ideal for a lot of plants, but if you don't have any sunlight, you can grow something. South-facing gardens get the most sunlight. Morning sun is also ideal for plants. And if you don't have sun, don't sweat it. There's so many shade-loving, cold-loving crops. Also, it's ideal if you're near a water source. If you have a windowsill and you can walk from your kitchen, fill up a container and water your garden, that's ideal too. So step one, scout your location. Pictures. Does anyone know what this is?
Smut near corn. Is that
corn smut?
Yeah.
It's a delicacy. You know the Spanish word? Corn smut?
Not smut. Maize is
Huitlacoche? It's good stuff. Put it in a quesadilla. I usually get huitlacoche not on purpose. I don't know. But okay, after you've scouted your location, that determines what you can grow a little more, because if there's no sun, then you have to be okay, a shade-loving crop. What do you like to eat is my second question for you. And then also, what amount of time and energy do you have, or are you willing to spend on your container gardens? Are you just gonna grow one thing that you plant it once and then you forget it and you just harvest it once a month? Or do you want to have are you ready to commit to pruning her every week, watering her every day, taking some duct tape and picking off pests by hand? So there's quite a range, right? If you have a lot of time, if you are like, oh yeah, we're retired, we want to spend a lot of time doing this because we love this, you can do it. But also if you don't have any time, you can still grow food in a container. After you choose your crops, I highly recommend you do some just quick Googling on what you've chosen to grow. There's a list of categories of foods that I put on the back of the worksheet that's more plain, that's not stapled. That's I broke it down into categories of easy, medium, hard. And did I break it down into cold loving and heat loving? I don't think so. But yeah, you can put it like Brussels sprouts into your search bar in Instagram or Google or YouTube. You're gonna find all the people who grew them in containers before you, and that will set you up for success. Also, when you're growing in containers, some things you direct sow, which means you put the seed right into the soil, right? Some things you start in a container indoors, like before its growing season, and then you transplant it once it's established itself a little bit. It's like 6 inches tall, and then you transplant it into your container where it will live for the rest of its life. So if you're gonna be transplanting and you don't necessarily wanna start your food from seeds yourself, you should hit us up at our spring plant sale. It goes for a month from the middle of April to May, and it's on our website. We have online ordering as well as just come by. Yes?
Where are you at?
We are 5602 Reed Street.
5602.
Yes.
Reed?
Reed.
Oh, Reed.
Yeah, and all of our staff who's working that day will be like, yes, here are our pro tips if you have any questions about what you're buying. And it's super affordable, and it goes to funding our programs where we're teaching kids in schools. So support us. There are other cool seed plant sales this spring, like the Sunflower Co-op has a good one. And they're a BIPOC-led cooperative where they bought land and they share the land, and they're black and brown majority as well as lead people growing food, and I highly recommend you support them as well. Okay, so example time. You have a north-facing 5x10 balcony outside your bedroom, maybe ground level, or if you're in an apartment, whatever. You have a west-facing window that gets hot, hot, hot. You love BLT sandwiches. Can you grow the lettuce and the tomato? How do you do it? Well, can you? Kind of. Some folks said that they've grown tomatoes in containers before, right? Yeah, it's a little tricky, but it can be done. And does anybody know, our tomatoes, do they need a lot of sunlight or not a lot of sunlight? They need a lot, usually. But also I've burnt tomatoes in North Dakota. So there are some tomatoes that can handle a more shady spot. And that, even though you would want to try to fit a tomato on your windowsill, you can do it. I'm not going to stop you. Anything can be done, and I love the creativity that growing food brings about. But I would probably keep my life simple by putting a smaller tomato in a container and then putting it on the back balcony. Tomatoes, as most plants, are super diverse. When we go to the grocery store, we only see 1 or 2 varieties, but in reality, there are hundreds of different varieties of tomatoes out there, right? And there are some that don't need as much sunlight, and I recommend you find one that's smaller, that has less days to maturity, and that's always right on the packet, and also maybe has a higher yield. So That's what I would do. And then the lettuce, is lettuce a heat-loving or a cold-loving plant? Cold. So I don't think you can really grow it in the summer. It'll eventually get too bitter. You can try. Yeah, and then you can grow it in both locations, in the spring and in the fall. Questions?
Do you recommend like a crop rotation or changing plants in different places, containers, the next year?
Yeah, so crop rotation, as we know from the research of, anybody know who like made this popular?
Sorry.
Huh? He made it, George Washington Carver. Yeah, he published this and he made it popular all around the world, like because of his research. So we know that crop rotation is necessary, otherwise we'll just deplete the soil. So kind of same concept, and that's actually on our next slide. Joe, you guessed it. Oh wait, no, it's in 2 slides. But so when we're growing food in containers, the nutrients in the containers will kind of just, they'll get depleted a lot faster as we're watering, and it's a smaller world in there, right? So, I mean, you can use the same soil every year as long as you keep adding compost. Yeah, and you can rotate it, but you can reuse the same soil, add compost in the same container, and like try to grow the same things. Okay. There are containers that you buy for plants, but you can also like use any old container. It just needs to have 2 things: holes for drainage and big enough for whatever you're growing. Get creative. A 5-gallon bucket from the hardware store. I see them on the side of the road as well. Pick one of those up, drill a couple holes in the bottom. And we also have some containers. Call us up. Our greenhouse manager, Kay, she can give you the hookup. Also, I highly recommend grow bags. They really range from cheap to super expensive, but grow bags are special because they're soft, and this is a grow bag here. Airflow happens a lot better in a grow bag as opposed to like hard plastic, and that's better for the roots and the flow, if that makes sense.
You don't want that directly on the ground though, do you? Is it going to get mold, or like, do you have something separating it from the?
Yeah, I mean yeah, as you can see, this is up above. This is like a cooling rack in between.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, and now we're going to talk about the soil. Don't use regular soil. It's too heavy. Normally, like, heavier soils can be okay, and there's nutrients in there. Muddy soil can be okay if you're in a regular garden, but in a very small environment that we're creating in our container, we need it to have airflow. It needs to be light and fluffy, because otherwise it will suffocate our roots, and like the water won't flow, the air won't flow. She's gonna die. As I mentioned before, the potting soil can be used year after year. Just gotta add soil amendments. There's so many different kinds of soil amendments.
What is OMRI?
Oh, OMRI approved. So it's, you know how like things that we eat, things that we consume are kind of regulated by different entities, like the government or a third party. So OMRI is, I don't remember all the things it stands for, but it's basically like a stamp of approval that it's organic. Organic matter. Do you know what it is? Yeah. We're just here for the vibes. We don't know what it means.
Potting soil that a lot of the garden centers use that are from Omaha composting or whatever, is that improved potting soil?
Say that again?
There's a company in Omaha that does the potting soil or mulch or whatever. Omaha Grow.
Soil Dynamics? The compost company, Soil Dynamics?
You can buy it.
Girl is what.
Grow, there you go.
Amagrow.
Compost. They take the yard waste from part of the city and compost it, so I don't think that would work as a
Oh,
that's
okay.
different. Okay.
Well,
It wouldn't be
Organic Materials Review Institute.
there we go. Thank you for looking that up. Yeah, and so we're talking more about, or you're talking about the amendment that you would be adding to the soil that is OMRI approved. So we're gonna start with like, you can find this at Home Depot, say. You get an OMRI approved potting soil, and then after a couple months, you do want to add compost to it, and so you could get it from a local compost company like Amagrow, or we love Soil Dynamics at the Big Garden, so. Soil Dynamics.
Are there any issues with plastic containers and soil transfer of chemicals or anything? Maybe.
I mean, yes and no. Even like, if you're using like a thin plastic, eventually plastics do break down, right? But it does take kind of a long time. I recommend if you're using like a thinner plastic of an old container that it's food safe approved, like a bakery. I don't know if you can reuse like something from the bakery at a grocery store maybe if it's big enough.
What about tires? Old tires?
Oh, I've seen it done. I don't know. I think that's fine.
I don't know if tires have that.
I thought those had bad things
A lot of
in the
chemicals.
soil.
Maybe flowers,
Yeah. Yeah, maybe don't eat it.
Still a lot of chemicals.
That's a good question.
Well, though, if you're on a farm and you have spare tires and you don't know where to take them, you stack two up, at least two, and then you plant the tomatoes in, and that's like your tree ring. It's like instead of those cages, and it works great.
Oh, to trellis it. That's cool.
So,
Yeah.
and you haven't, I mean, you're not worried about whatever chemicals are in the
I
tires?
grew up
or-
on the farm. I drank well water out of a garden hose.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
no.
did too.
As far as I know, I'm still pretty healthy. So no, I don't get too worried about that.
Yeah. If you're trying to grow in a tire, you can ask us for a container first for the food safety of it.
Out in town and probably go over so well, but.
Okay, so after we've scouted our location, we found a container, and we filled it. We picked our soil, so we can start growing our seeds, right? Allow enough room for plants to grow. Spacing, it's so important because if you don't have enough space, it's not going to grow. You can grow multiple things in the same container if you want, if there's enough space. It depends on what you're growing. And then this diagram is showing how deep seeds, this is the general rule of thumb, how deep should we plant a seed. So this is one seed, metric seed length, and then that's how deep we're going. Yeah, and then if you're putting a seedling in your pot, transplant it. A really important thing if you're starting seeds, you gotta keep it really wet. Otherwise, it's gonna take forever to germinate and then start growing. Okay, and then my last tip for you is to pay attention. Just spend some time with your container gardens. Listen to it, and it will tell you if it needs something. These are some examples of plants that are in need of something. These are wilted peppers, and does anybody know what either of these pests are?
Is it an aphid?
Not an aphid.
The caterpillars, they can have cabbages.
Yep. the cabbages, the broccolis, the kales,
Butterflies.
and they're white butterflies. Yep, exactly. This is the cabbage loper. We don't like those. And then this squash bug. Yep. If you're squash bugs, they're bad news. If you're growing something in the squash family, I guarantee you will get squash bugs. Don't be afraid. So, like everything that we see in the grocery store is beautiful and it's perfect, and don't have your expectations like at that beautiful, symmetrical, bright red tomato. Bugs are in nature, and we aren't gonna spray like gross pesticides on our plants because we don't want that stuff in our bodies. So you're gonna have some pests. There are ways to manage these and have healthy plants and have food to harvest from your plants. And then harvest and enjoy. That's the last step. Don't wait too long. Don't wait for it to get as big as the grocery store peppers. They're probably not gonna get that big. They're just gonna get hard and woody. Just harvest it now. And that also usually like peppers and other indeterminate plants, when you harvest it, it invigorates the plant so it will continue to put out flowers and fruit. So you get more to harvest. Okay, so that's the slideshow. Now let's spend some time talking about what we're growing, make plans. Does anybody have any questions?
So what do you do about the bugs?
Which bugs?
Any and all bugs?
So you recommend picking the squash bugs off and throwing them? I mean, what is your recommendation?
Yeah. Okay, so what we do at the Big Garden to manage squash bugs is we catch them as early as we can. We go around with some duct tape and you just stick it on the little eggs. Yep, and they just come right off. Also, I learned last year that if you squish squash bugs in the garden, that apparently attracts other squash bugs, and they're like, oh, dead squash bugs. There's squash bugs here because there's food here. Like, let's come in. So it brings in more squash bugs, maybe. So don't squish them in the garden.
Japanese beetles. If you squash them, then it ends up attracting.
Yep. Another lovely pest.
Are there like some companion planting options that can help deter pests without resorting to pesticides?
Yeah. If you Google whatever you're growing, and then you can find a companion plant. It's typically something fragrant or stinky. Bugs, yeah, like anything that tastes bitter and spicy to us is like a plant's defenses against insects, because they like co-evolved together, and that's why we like certain plants, because they're antioxidants. That's how they fight off the plants. So yeah, a lot of common companion plants. I'm sure all of you know, like your herbs and marigolds, like flowers that are more fragrant. Onions. Onions for squash bugs, says Kay, who's very smart. And then for the cabbage lopers, it's really tough. I've seen like a whole field of cabbage lopers. If you let it like just do its thing, and you got a whole little patch of kale or something, it's hard. But so what I've done in the past is when it's young, you keep it covered with row cover, which is like very affordable white thin cloth. It kind of looks like cheesecloth, and then you just like weigh it down with rocks, and then have a little wire that you stick it in the ground, and so that keeps it covered. That's a physical barrier. Another thing with pests that come and nibble, a lot of people use what is it called? Diatomaceous earth. Yep.
Ground, it's like ground,
Seashell.
Diatoms. Yep.
all over here. But that kills beneficial insects.
It does. It kills all the things. And then it washes off with the rain, so you have to reapply.
I've read before that you could make like a spray out of like, soapy water and spray them, or I've read that too, but I didn't know if that was really that effective.
Yeah, we use that at the Big Garden, like soap and that oil, neem oil. Neem oil and dish soap is a thing. I feel like cabbage lopers, they die down. They give up when it gets too hot. That's my observations. Yeah, generally speaking, brassicas are kind of tricky here in Nebraska. I have grown in 4 different states, like north to south in the Midwest, and brassicas are so fun and tasty in Minnesota and North Dakota because they're cold-loving crops, but they also require a lot of days before you harvest them. They need a lot of time and space. I get it. Here in Omaha, our springs are 0 to 100 oftentimes, especially in the city with the heat effect of a city. So it can be done. It is a little tricky. You should do some Googling if you're trying to grow some brassicas. I don't know. Do we want to talk about brassicas? Kale is cool. Kale. If you're gonna grow brassicas, you should grow kale. Kale is a good starter plant, I think. You plant it in the spring. It starts small, and you harvest it from the outsides because the new growth happens in the center. And like all brassicas, it has a growth node at the top, and that's called apical dominance. So it will keep growing up throughout the rest of the year. So you take the bigger ones from the outside, and then you eat those, and it will continue to grow, and eventually you have a kale tree. Kale is pretty easy. Just keep it watered and keep harvesting. What? Spinach. Spinach. I've found a couple of varieties of spinach that don't bolt and as it gets hotter, but spinach is also kind of hard to grow as spring turns into summer. But if you have a shady spot, you should put your spinach there. Has less days to maturity, and yeah.
Comments about watering, like spraying or those containers that hold watering.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, did I have that in here? I think I might have skipped over it. Did I talk about watering?
No,
Oh.
other than should be near a water source.
Okay, so yes, watering, there's so many ways to do it. Is it called an Oya? It's an Oya style. If you want to Google it, OLLA. It's such a simple concept. So it's terracotta. It's like a bulb of terracotta, and you bury that with whatever you're growing, and the water slowly seeps out over multiple weeks, and so it waters your plant for you. So if you have a container, you plant your Oya, and then you plant your seedling or your seed. If you're starting from seed, I don't recommend you depend just on an Oya to water your direct sow. Keep that watered. And then in terms of watering, so water is usually better than no water, and I've seen people, those watering sprinkler that goes like this. There's a garden that we have that they were watering their garden that way, and everything got aphids, and also all of the leaves got really sick because water on, like directly on some leaves, depending on what plant you have, makes it a lot more vulnerable to disease in a lot of ways. It's like either weighing the leaves down onto the soil, and then contact with the soil is an opportunity for it. You know, like when you have a cut and then you get dirt in it, it's more likely to get infected. Same concept when a plant has a cut and it's getting dirt into it. And then also like it's sticking to other branches and there's no airflow, and it just gets like wet and dry in all the wrong ways. So I don't recommend just like spraying the whole plant unless you don't have any time and you just have time to put out your sprinkler. Aim for the roots. And if you like are sore and you can't reach down, you can get a little wand for like $6.99 at a hardware store. The cheapest ones. Try not to get the leaves wet. Yeah.
If we're concerned about the soil in our garden currently, where can we go to get it tested, soil testing?
So there's a website that you can go to, the lead inventory? Not
I'm
inventory.
not really worried about the lead per se. I want to know, does it need nutrients of some kind? Yeah.
Potassium.
Okay, so then you can get a small sample of whatever soil you want to be tested, and you can send it to Midwest Labs for pretty affordable. Also, depending on what you want to test it for, you can go on the internet and get some at-home tests where you have a strip that tests for different things like pH in your soil. And some of the tests take 45 seconds, some of them take like a whole day.
But you don't have that problem if you're using organic plant soil.
Right.
Yeah.
My garden's just, it's an older garden.
Right.
So, and even though I refreshened it last year, I think some of the things that you just said might have been why my garden didn't do so well last year. But it'd still be nice to know if I need to add like some fertilizer or some kind.
Yeah, I recommend, yeah, you should get some compost. Try that. You can put it just around the base of all of your plants.
Is this where you get terrible?
Well, I think I did compost and dirt, like a 1-to-1 mix, and then tilled it in. But I think it was the watering that you were saying.
What were you growing?
Tomatoes.
Tomatoes are needy babes.
Yeah, my tomatoes did.
That's a whole different class.
Yeah, I know. That's like, and that's not an amateur class. That's like a pro class.
Yeah, that's level 2.
Yeah.
Everybody had trouble with tomatoes last year. It was just something about the year and the growing conditions. We didn't have very good luck with our tomatoes at the Tri-Faith Garden, and the year before we had bushels of tomatoes.
All right, that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, a lot of tomatoes have the black spots on them too. Yeah, like they get too wet or whatever. That happened a lot last
Supposed to
year.
let them dry out in watering.
Yeah, so tomatoes are sensitive. And I loved growing tomatoes, but you got to know what you're working with, right? They need like consistent watering, because otherwise that affects their ability to take up nutrients from the soil. They need to be trellised. They need to be pruned.
That's so worth it.
It is so worth it. Yeah.
But I have to say though, like in containers, I don't try to grow bigger tomatoes necessarily. I might try to grow less. But now that we've had this talk, but the grape tomatoes and cherry tomatoes and things, they're so good, and they do grow in pots. And you still have to trellis them and stuff. And we have this kind of old metal old deteriorating metal, gazebo thing, but I usually put them on a corner where that can be kind of a trellis too, you can even tie it up. I mean, they get as tall as the thing, and they just, once they start producing, and we're taking a bowl in every day. So, and it's great for grandchildren. You can pop them in your mouth and try to encourage them.
Yeah, so you figured tomatoes out.
Yeah, so.
Good for you.
But those, as far as like having a good slab for a BLT, the grape tomatoes get pretty big.
Oh, I love grape tomatoes. I know people want to buy like a 5-pound slicing tomato from the market.
Well, and then there's nothing wrong with supporting your local farmers markets for some of those things too.
Recommendations for deterring bunnies and little dudes like that, because that's primarily who they don't like broccoli, bunnies.
Yeah. Bunnies,
Well, they gotta eat too.
they do got it. Yeah.
I have a really good one with like liquid fence.
Liquid fence. Is it deer?
Like you don't want to be downwind when you're putting it on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that stuff that smells like,
It smells like,
Wear gloves.
it smells like garlic, and I don't know what I get is like, it's sort of like rabbit scataway or whatever, and it's garlic and rosemary.
Oh, cool.
And it's very fragrant. My dog won't even go near the garden after I spray that.
But the thing is, again, you have to continuously spray it. So
Yeah.
it depends on what you
Do it
get.
when it's
Some
not
of
gonna
it's
rain.
pretty foul.
Huh. And that's called what away?
I don't know, it was like, I got it at the hardware store, and it's got a rabbit on it, and got
Ah.
garlic and rosemary,
Yeah.
or geranium oil or something, I don't know, it was pretty stenchy.
Yeah. That's a good question. It's probably a combination of like having a cat. The big garden have cats. Like that's how we don't have any pests. We just have cats that like hang out at our gardens. A dog, yeah. You can get smaller fences and you work that. If you put like a small fence around the base of your container and combine like a physical barrier with more the interplanting companion plants that we talked about, like that these sprays are using, or use a spray.
But they are small. They are when it comes to getting food. Any of them. I tried to grow corn and I grew it by a fence. Squirrels came along, jumped on the corn, rode it to the ground.
Wow.
There
Dang.
you go. I had no corn that year.
Yep.
So they have
Squirrels are very inventive.
physical barriers for those type of stuff. Like,
I have a fence around my garden.
okay. There's different types of fence.
But if you put them in pots, because in your pots, they're rabbits.
They still do.
They have to pretty short pots.
They're,
They're really
They can get in there. They like it. They love that broccoli, man. That's.
Another thing, yeah, another thing I found is like when I'm pruning something or taking off, I don't know, cleaning in a garden, like taking off a rotten tomato, taking off a rotten leaf of whatever, kale, like the good ones are for me and then like these ones are for you. If you kind of just throw those away, they're gonna eat that tomato on the ground rather than climbing up to get something. But yeah, it's not perfect. You're gonna have pests.
So do you throw, the rotten tomatoes or something just over in one space, or do you try to get it out of your garden or away from your containers, or what do you do with bad leaves and things?
Oh, I just throw it on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mulch.
Or a compost
Yeah.
pile.
Yeah.
Composter.
Okay, so that was 10 minutes past. Does anyone have any final questions? Also included a list of other organizations that are doing similar work that we at the Big Garden do. If you like what you talked about and learned about here today, come support us. Also come support other folks that are doing this work because it matters and it's important. And that's all. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.